Welcome back. Christopher Taylor here with Sovereign Harmony. Good to see you again. It hasn't been too long since the last one, about 5 weeks ago. I just wanted to step back in. If you're not aware, Mercury is now retrograde as of yesterday. Today is Monday, September 27th. It's about a little after 3 p.m. You can see right here, local time where I am in California. And Mercury just went retrograde last night. And it's going to be retrograde through October 18th. So we got a little run of Mercury in Libra, retrograding in Libra the entire time. So I wanted to touch base about that, as well as what will be coming up shortly after the retrograde, which will be the November and early December eclipses here at the end of 2021. And then we'll prelude a little bit into 2022, some pretty significant events here as far as, especially in the US, astrologically speaking. So it's going to be a very important year, and we'll touch base on that. But I want to focus mostly on this Mercury retrograde in Libra and then the eclipses. We'll talk about the other stuff later. So hope everyone is doing well. Don't be too afraid of Mercury retrograde. I always say it's not, it gets a bad rap for being a time when you don't want to do anything or start anything or anything like that. And that can be true, but it's also just a really great time to perfect things and to go back over things. And so if there's anything that needs to be edited or redone or re-looked at, this is the time for that, depending on where it is in your chart. That's the area of life that you'd want to focus on, that rewiring or redoing and things. So Mercury retrograde can be a very, very useful time. If you are trying to launch something brand new, it's important to really weigh over all your options before taking action. That's all. And when it's in Libra, even more so. So Libra really does have to do with kind of like weighing the scales of things. So when Mercury's in Libra, we don't want to go with the first thought. We want to consider all thoughts, and especially when it's retrograde in Libra. Now we really want to make sure that if we're dealing with something new, that we're really looking at all sides of things, not just our perspective, but everyone's perspective. But if we're going back to a project or something, or especially a relationship, some kind of one-on-one interaction with someone, this is a great time to review that connection and to go back over things, what worked, what didn't work, et cetera, and to come to some kind of new stepping point moving forward when Mercury returns direct later in October 18th. Like I said, so it'll be September 26th to October 18th. That's the Mercury retrograde in Libra period. So again, don't be afraid of it. Don't be like, oh, I can't do this because it's Mercury retrograde, or this happened because Mercury retrograde. That's all, that's very disempowering. And so just important to stay in our power and use the energy in the most beneficial ways possible for us, whatever that might entail, for example. And a couple of the aspects that Mercury is going to make during this period, so there'll be extended aspects. One is a really strong square to Pluto in Capricorn. So if you've watched my videos before, Pluto in Capricorn, its significance, in the grander scheme of things. And I alluded to the 2022 being extremely important for the United States, particularly. Now it has to do with the Pluto return, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the point is, this Mercury in Libra is going to be squaring Pluto in Capricorn. So that's going to be one theme, but it's also going to be paired with a trine from Mercury to Jupiter in Aquarius. And Jupiter in Aquarius and Pluto in Capricorn are very different kinds of energy. So this is a few-week period where we're going to be reevaluating our relationships again, and kind of dealing with the concept of disagreement. Okay, so that square to Pluto is pretty intense, and that's kind of that internally. It's that sense of not being able to align two lines of thought together. And so if we have two things that seem very logical but they can't happen at the same time, Mercury and Pluto, or Mercury squaring Pluto, really represents that kind of an inability to compromise, or an inability to integrate, or the perception that there's an inability to do that. But the trine to Jupiter in Aquarius is this sense of expanding our perceptions and expanding them in a way that kind of opens up the future. So if we've been blocked, if the future we want has been blocked by our own limitations in thought and limitations in how these two can coincide together, then this can be a really good time to confront that perception of inability to integrate, and allow ourselves to expand to the point where we can integrate that. And so it's a growth period. It's a really great opportunity the next few weeks to reevaluate certain conclusions that we might have come to, and realize that this is, you know, this is a time when we can open those conclusions back up again, and kind of redecide based on new information what we then conclude. Okay, and so looking here at the wheelie dealie, I'll update it to the current time. Now it's 3:14 p.m. on the 27th, and we can see there is Mercury right there. And on planetwatcher.com, whenever the planet is in retrograde, it's going to have a red ink next to the degree that it's at. So right, it's at 25 degrees Libra, and it's going to retrograde back to about 10 degrees Libra before it heads forward again in October, like I said. And so you can see where it is there at 25 degrees, and it's squaring Pluto pretty closely. So it's just recently formed an exact square. It's going to back over there the next couple of days. And then before it ends its retrograde cycle, it'll form a third square to Pluto. So that's where that's going to come from. And then here is Jupiter, that will also be getting that trine, that 120 degree or 4 signs away energy. And so both are going to be active planets here. And if you'll notice, all 3 of these planets are also retrograde. Okay, so we're going to talk about that a little bit too, because as we move into October, all 3 of these planets are going to pop in succession. In fact, in the order that you see them here with Pluto right here, that's going to pop and move direct in Capricorn on October 6th. So this is just next week. And then just a few days later, on October 10th, Saturn goes direct in Aquarius. And then just about a week after that, October 17th, and just hours before Mercury turns direct in Libra, Jupiter will turn direct in Aquarius. So there is a sense of this unlocking going on here with this Mercury retrograde, and it's due to this reevaluation, to re-looking at things and really digging into, again, like we said, some things that seem like foregone conclusions, that are answered questions or settled science or whatever it might be, and realize that there's a lot more wiggle room there. And so it's the challenge of using that Plutonian energy to kind of break through and dig in, and allow ourselves to be vulnerable in that idea that we could be wrong, right? Or that we could improve what our sense of right is. Okay. And then with Jupiter, there's that sense of, again, expanding our possibilities for the future, that Jupiter in Aquarius. And that happens when all of a sudden we're not blocked by the limitations that arose from our conclusions, our previous conclusions, right? So now if we can conclude something differently based on new information, it expands our possibilities. So it kind of all works in succession like that. And if you remember from my last video, you might want to go back and check, I had mentioned that Jupiter in Aquarius, its energy is kind of going to be with us to the end of 2021. And it's going to go direct here in Aquarius, October 17th, and then it'll enter Pisces just before 2022. I think it's December 28th. So just a few days before the end of the year. And, going back to what I talked about in that other video, is this idea of, the lockdowns and the rebellions, lockdowns being represented really harshly by this Pluto and Capricorn energy, and this sort of rebellion and freedom represented by Jupiter and Aquarius. And so I think on a collective level, we're going to see a lot of reevaluation of the data and the science. And while there could be attempts when Pluto goes direct, for example, in Capricorn, that's October 7th or 6th, it's immediately followed within the next week or so by Saturn and Jupiter moving forward in Aquarius, which is very freedom evoking and freedom loving. So every single fall, viral numbers go up and deaths go up, mostly because seasonal viruses are highly tied to vitamin D. Not a medical professional, so don't take my advice, but that's what a lot of the literature suggests, is that there's some link between vitamin D deficiencies and having severe reactions to flus and COVID and things like that. And there's a natural vitamin D deficiency in the fall that lasts through the winter. And that's just because sunlight is important in developing that. And so in October, when the numbers skyrocket, which they will, they always do, in we could kind of see how government, Capricorn, right? Pluto and Capricorn, that's probably going to lead to an increase in lockdowns and mask mandates and other mandates, et cetera. But it's going to be immediately followed by more of a collective resistance and rebellion to that. That's what I'm looking, that's what I see here. And in our personal lives, we can also kind of see this as, maybe certain attempts to lock ourselves down, or again, our limited thoughts or limited thinking, and then through this process, kind of coming out of it with a more expanded sense of possibility and what we can do next, right? So on a personal level, whether it's our job or whatever it is, that can be parallel experience to the collective that's going on with the COVID situation and mandates and things like that. So a really interesting time here as we enter the fall, I think. And of course, eclipse season is always exciting, right? And we're actually transitioning the moon's nodes, which are that little horseshoe thing right here. You can see it's at 3 degrees Gemini. And if you're not familiar, the nodes go backwards through the signs. Okay, so the south node right now is at 3 degrees Sag, north node at 3 degrees Gemini, and they're about to back into the other signs. So it's about to be a north node in Taurus and the south node in Scorpio. And that's going to happen, I think, in January. Might be February. I think it's January. I believe it's January. But anyway, we're creeping up to that. And so we have this transition of the eclipses, because the eclipses, they happen along those nodal lines. That's kind of, it's just a point in the sky that's the transition between the sun and the moon, their axes, or the axes, whatever the word is there. And that represents where they cross each other's paths, basically, from our point of view. And so the eclipses, whether it's the moon being eclipsed by the Earth's shadow, or it's the sun literally being eclipsed by the moon passing over it, it happens when the sun and moon are near the nodes. And so that drifts in time, et cetera. And so this time we're heading to a transition, because we've had the last several eclipses, the last year plus, have been in Gemini Sagittarius. And this Gemini Sagittarius zone has been a lot about information sharing and coming out, and confusion, because it's hard to tell what's true, what's factual, what's theory versus fact, things like that. And so it's just been a lot of overflow of information, whereas Scorpio and Taurus is a time that has a lot more to do with kind of physical changes, physical transformations. So that can be financial. So I feel like there could be some financial repercussions to what we've been learning the last year and a half or so. So, I mean, it's in the air, all this suggestion of, like, there's these slowdowns with shipping and transit and, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. So the information is all out there, but the actual hammer may drop here in 2022, and that's going to prelude us to the whole idea of the Pluto return in the US. But going back to the eclipses real quick, so this transition is significant. It's going to mean that we are transiting, and the two eclipses that are going to happen here in the fall, we have one November 19th, and that's going to be the first Taurus Scorpio axis eclipse. So what's going to happen is it'll be at the very late degrees of Taurus, while the North Node is technically still in Gemini, but it's going to be close enough that there will be a lunar eclipse, and it'll be with the sun will be in very late Scorpio. Late Scorpio, and the moon will be in late Taurus, and it'll be close enough to get in that eclipse zone. And so this is going to be the first kind of prelude of what's coming up the next year or so, year or two coming down the line. And then it's going to be followed a couple of weeks later by a solar eclipse, and that's going to be in Sagittarius. So it's the old pattern of eclipses that we have been having. So there's this overlap happening where we're not just transitioning into a new set, but we're getting one of each, one from the old and one from the new as we transition over. So this really does signify a transition point. Okay, so and this is all happening right after, again, this kind of break free energy that happens here in October into November, and it kind of rides the tails of that. So what could be in store here? That Taurus lunar eclipse that happens in late November, that is forming a trine to Pluto and Capricorn. So there's that Pluto and Capricorn again, and to a square to Jupiter and Aquarius. So those same planets that this Mercury retrograde is going to be making an acquaintance with, but in a different way, is going to be, you know, part of this eclipse too. So the next few months is all kind of intertwined energetically. And again, a lot of this goes back to the major theme of this Mercury retrograde in Libra, which is basically coming to terms with disagreement. So I always say, if you follow me on Facebook, on Telegram, you know, once in a while the energy feels right to say it again. I have it on my website and everything. Is to be free, we must disagree, and it's just a statement that is very clear that we really don't experience freedom unless we're willing to break free from the sort of comfort of being accepted, right? And there's true freedom and standing on your own and knowing that, you know, what you're seeing is true, even if no one else can see it. And that's really a point of freedom. And there's some fear in freedom. There's some fear of the responsibility of the freedom, of being separate, et cetera. It goes back to our, you know, ancient upbringings and whatnot, and you know, old wiring inside of us. But the idea being is that with this Mercury, especially that square to Pluto over the course of the next few weeks, is this confrontation of, again, our own inner limitations, and this confrontation to break free and be able to stand on our own instead of compromising our own beliefs just to be accepted. Okay. And I feel like that's a big part of what this eclipse is going to bring up as well, is some of that same kind of information. And that's a game changer within, in a lot of ways. And it could be the start on a collective level, start of the rumblings of sort of bigger financial changes on a global scale. And then when that gets followed up by the solar eclipse here in Sagittarius, that's going to be about mid-Sagittarius, and that is going to be connected with Mercury, conjunct Mercury, and it's going to form some soft aspects to Saturn in Aquarius, but also Chiron in Aries down here. And this, again, goes along with that theme of trusting ourselves. So we're walking into a future where we can't rely on sort of like going with one side or another, right? This whole dichotomy and the splitting of people, especially politically. We're coming into a place where having a sense of sovereign authority, sovereign perception, that's where life wants to be lived, essentially. And those of us that take the brave step toward that and aren't afraid to, you know, see the validity in this, but also the validity in that, and to be able to hold those two things that they want us, or like, you know, we should be perceived to believe cannot coexist, that are contradictory, but hold them both at the same time. And that's really the challenge here. What we're trying to do, again, reiterating this Libra Mercury retrograde and then these eclipses, is coming to this place where we're allowed to take the best and leave the rest, essentially, and not have to choose one or the other, but understand that we can take the pieces of what works with one thing, the pieces of what works with another, and integrate them. And we don't have to see them as directly opposing each other or contradictory or impossible to merge. And when you're in that ability, you're in your mind and you're in your own sense of empowerment, and you're not manipulated into division. Okay. And that's really our way out of this whole division issue right now, because that's done from the top down, and it's done for a reason. It's done to have control, to have your power in their hands. But to have our power taken back in our hands, that's when you step into sovereign authority. And that's when we basically realize that we can take the best and leave the rest, and have our own unique set of integrated principles, rather than an either or. Like, if you believe this, then you don't believe that. And if you're for this, then you must be against that. And it's just not true for any individual, yet we're made to believe that. And if we simplify ourselves to that kind of division, that's what's causing disempowerment and the ability for continued government overreach and other things of that nature. So this is a real growth period, I think, both collectively and personally coming up. And it's important because, like I said, I was going to do a slight prelude into what's coming up in 2022, because this is all going to be really, really necessary for us to develop, because if you're familiar with the concept of a Saturn return, which is something that on an individual level, when I go over people's charts, Saturn takes about 29.5 years to go around the zodiac. So for example, Saturn's at 7 degrees Aquarius right now. If someone was born today, roughly 29 years from now, Saturn's going to make its way back to about 7 degrees Aquarius, and they're going to be going through this Saturn return. And so we get approximately 3, if we live a full life, we might see 3 Saturn returns in our life, but most people see 2. Some people only see 1. We get one at age 29, you get another one about your mid 50s, and then if you make it to your 3rd one, you're gonna be like in your early to mid 80s. And it's basically divides our life into 3 parts, and it's just something I won't get into here. But the Pluto return also has significance, but because it takes about 248 years, I believe it is, to go around the zodiac, Pluto, which you see right here, it was at about 27 degrees Capricorn in 1776 when the United States was formed. Not coincidentally, perhaps, or coincidentally, however we want to look at it, on May 1st, 1976, just a couple months before that, was the Bavarian Illuminati. It's a thing, and that's when it was started. And so it's interesting that the United States, which is on paper this opportunity for sovereign individuality and freedom and liberty, was formed right around the same time that an organization was formed that's whole purpose was to take away individual liberties and to infiltrate and infuse itself, and take people's power from them, essentially, right? And we're at a battle point right now where which of those is going to win, right? Which is going to die, because Pluto has to do with death and resurrection or total transformation. There's no in between. It's the phoenix rising from the ashes, but there has to be ashes first. And so we're at a point where the United States of America, the concept could dissolve and die completely, but it could also be burnt and resurrected, okay, and in a more pure form, okay. And that's this point we're coming to, because Pluto is about to hit that point, and it's going to make its exact conjunctions to that point in Capricorn here. The first one comes up in late February, so not too far away. Really, like, what is that? What month is it? So we're talking like 5 months, something like that, 5 months away. And then in mid-July 2022, and then the final exact pass will be December 28th, 2022. So pretty much the year of 2022 is the year of the 3 exact conjunctions for the United States chart. Very important, very, very important for the people of the US and for the world at large, due to the position of the country on the world stage. So very important year. But we can even look at the a wider orb for Pluto, for where Pluto is. So if we use a 3-degree orb, which is a fairly small one, but in other words, when Pluto got to about 3 degrees away from the position where it was at the birth of the US, and then when it basically gets 3 degrees away or enters Aquarius, that's kind of a real signifier of the end. That is something that literally started the 3-degree orb. So when it was literally about 24 degrees Capricorn, where it is right now, actually, but when it first hit that point, it was mid-March 2020. Can't make that up. Okay, mid-March 2020. This is obviously when the coronavirus hit, and the shutdowns, the actual reality of that situation, and the idea of the 15 days to stop the spread and all that came down at that time. Okay, so that's Pluto and Capricorn in action. And that's literally when the 3-degree orb was entered for the United States Pluto return. And the way I see it is when it exits Capricorn and it's actually in Aquarius, and that's when you can say the 3-degree orb is over. And that is something that's going to happen throughout 2023 into 2024. So it's kind of on the horizon. So you can think of like the window of the 3-degree orb, so the 6-degree zone of Pluto starts in March of 2020, and it ends throughout 2023 into 2024, with the peak being those exact conjunctions throughout the year of 2022. So there's one in February, July, and then December 2022. So big death and resurrection coming up here for the concept of the United States of America, but it's also a death and resurrection, or death completely, of other forces that that are disempowering, etc. So that Bavarian Illuminati, for example. And I go over some of this stuff in previous videos. I recommend, if you find this interesting, go back to some of my longer videos, just a little bit long, just scroll down my previous videos. I did something talking about 2021 in general. Once this year was started, it was right before the election. I talked about the 2020 election, and so I go into some of this stuff as well. And there's a few other videos that I talk about this too. So because I don't want to get too in depth here, but the point is, this is coming up on the immediate horizon here. And this time period, this fall, is really a prep period. It's, can we break down old limiting thought patterns? Can we integrate in a more expanded sense of, again, taking the best and leaving the rest, and having our own unique sovereign perception, instead of feeling like we have to join one side or another? Because literally that is how you break the ability for someone or some entity to have power over you, is when you don't allow yourself to be, number one, divided internally, but also divided amongst each other. And that is really the way to get people under control, is to divide them. And so if we can take individual responsibility to produce our own sovereign perception, based on reason and logic, but also our own deep rooted intuition, that is really what's going to allow us to accept ourselves as unique perspectives and individuals, but also accept each other and agree to be in a state of disagreement, right? To be free, we must disagree. You'll never truly be free unless you not only allow yourself to disagree with others, but allow others to disagree with you. And that's a huge lesson that I feel like is really ramping up here. And it probably has a lot to do with the information influx that's come in the last year and a half. And that's associated, again, with that Sagittarius Gemini nodal axis that we've been experiencing the last year plus, almost 2 years or so. And what physical changes that might bring here over the next couple of years, with the transition into Taurus Scorpio that starts here in 2022, just as the Pluto return is happening in the US. So we'll go back over that. I'll come back here probably right after the eclipses, probably just before the holidays, and kind of reiterate what's coming for 2022. But I just wanted to bring that up because we can never isolate anything in astrology to one little period. Everything kind of evolves and then precludes the next. And so it's important just to talk about what's happened, what's happening now, and then what this is leading to. So that's just some food for thought there as we head into the fall here. So anyway, thank you for sitting with me again. I enjoy your feedback, so feel free to comment below. Also, definitely feel free if you want to get more content. I am always on Facebook, Sovereign Harmony Astrology. It's a great place to get semi-daily updates. I update depending on what's happening with the planets. I also post that on Telegram. So if you're on Telegram, it's even better way to get the info, because you can get every single update. On Facebook, you might just get an update here and there, because the algorithms are weird. So if you're not actually going to my page to look, which I'm sure most people don't, you're not going to actually see it. And so I enjoy feedback on there as well. And what I'm going to do here for the next couple of months, for October and November, is, if you haven't worked with me, or if you have, this is going to be an opportunity to get a special deal for YouTube subscribers only. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. And I'm gonna do a special deal just for subscribers. So if you are interested in that, as far as looking into your own chart with these energies, etc., we can look into what's coming up for the next year, 2022. But if you are a YouTube subscriber, contact me through YouTube or through Facebook, whatever you want to do, and I will make sure that you get the deal, and we'll do a little Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, whatever it takes to go over your chart with you. So with that, please do contact me. Like I said, please share this with anybody that you think would like it. And I will check back in after these eclipses and just before the holidays to kind of jump off into 2022. But for the meantime, again, really don't be afraid to disagree. Revel in disagreement, revel in the idea that you can have two reasonable individuals that simply don't agree on certain points, right? And that's where we got to be at if you really want peace and harmony, and we really want our own freedom. Is we have to let people go and let ourselves go where we want to go. So with that, have a great one, and I will talk to you again soon. Again, Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony. We'll see you next time. Bye.